Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you are having a great conference so far. My name is Sudarshan Sirapu. I'm the Customer Advocacy Manager out of the West Coast. And I actually support the enterprise strategic accounts out of the Bay Area. I was a former customer, just like you guys. I was at Cisco Systems for almost 10 years. And I was one of the solution architects for Tableau. Worked on HANA quite a bit. So today I'm here to share with you some of my experiences and then also the use cases would like to share with you. And hopefully you'll get some value out of this session. So I would like to introduce my co-speaker and colleague, Ritesh McKenna.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ritesh McKenna. I'm the principal architect in the services team. And I'm a former customer as well. I'm coming from Glassdoor. So I've been with Tableau for 2 years, but prior to that, I was coming from Glassdoor, where I was using Tableau a lot. Big success stories, so I wanted to take the success stories to a lot more customers. That's why I joined the services team. And it's been a good journey so far. And I hope the session will be very much useful to you. We have a big agenda, and we'll get going.
Yeah. So today's agenda, before I start, I just want to ask, how many of you are new to Tableau? Yeah, maybe 10% of the room, okay. How many of you heard the term HANA?
Oh.
How many of you have not heard HANA? Okay, that's great, because I just want to make sure all of you know what is HANA, and I don't want to just keep talking about HANA and then at the end, what is HANA? You know?
How many of you have been using HANA for more than a year? That's good.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice. And so we're going to dive into the agenda here. Before I get into deep dive HANA stuff, I want to actually give some introduction to our semantic layer, and then followed by the row level security that most of you are interested here. I know for sure. How many of you are interested to hear about row level security in HANA and Tableau?
And authentication.
I think everyone in the room. I know that. And then we're going to cover a use case using JavaScript API and HANA to enhance experience for executive dashboards, and where you have lots of quick filters and stuff like that. I think you're all familiar what I'm talking about. So we're going to show an example how to actually enhance that experience with JavaScript API. And then this is an interesting topic, on-demand cache refresh. Not many of the Tableau folks are aware of this, but we're going to show some technique how to actually refresh that cache on demand.
Yeah.
And then we will give you ample time at the end for Q&A. And also, if it exceeds the time, we are willing to actually spend time with you guys outside the room as well. And we can talk much more than this agenda itself.
Yeah, by the way, we picked up this agenda based upon our customer interactions, their issues since last couple of months, years. But if you have any specific items that we can discuss, we have a lot more to share. We can always discuss after the session. Please feel free to stay back.
So let's begin with the semantic layer. So most of you have worked with a lot of BI platforms, and semantic layer is what mostly we start with. And a lot of people ask me this question, like, does Tableau have any semantic layer at all? Because we just get started and we just drag and drop and we just start building whizzes. But where is the semantic layer in Tableau? It's not visible, like RPDs or universes. Like, I think most of you are familiar with these terms, right? Universe, RPDs. I don't want to name the products, but yeah, these are the terms we are used to. So today I thought I would share how a semantic layer in Tableau can be actually achieved. And, but before jumping into the demo and showing you how to build the semantic layer, we need to understand why we need to even understand about semantic layer in Tableau. One of the prime reasons I would say is the super users or the business users who are actually trying to get some insight from the data, they need visibility into the data, but then sometimes business users are not familiar with the data model behind the data in the database, or what is Teradata, what is HANA, what is Oracle. They don't have to spend time on those things. They would want to actually dive into the data right away and try to answer some questions and find out the insights from there, right? So it is definitely going to help the business users. And then the second one is also federation of data. Obviously, you want to have data coming from different sources not just from a single EDW, but I also have users sending me Excel spreadsheets. And then I have under the desk, I have a SQL server. I also want to verify the data before I say, yeah, this is the right data for me. So that's another use case. And then also distributed development, like where, like in traditional BI tools, you must be familiar with multi-user development, right? How do I make use of this metadata layer so I can actually have multiple users working at the same time, but not actually disturbing the actual data model itself? So these are some of the prime reasons why we need the semantic layer, but the benefits are huge, right? You can actually improve your security and governance by knowing how actually this model is set up in the backend. And then also you can reduce the amount of latency that you actually get from the data, because if it is like every user have to build their own data sources, and they are actually trying to create an extract and schedule it, there's so much lag. And you want to actually reduce all that. So you can actually have a semantic layer that is already published on the Tableau server, and you actually get the information when you want it. There's no latency there.
So does that mean not every report should have its own data source? Multiple reports should be sharing one single data source?
So
is that the concept?
That's a good question. Actually, you know, most users, they try to build their own reports. And what it turns out to be, a lot of siloed workbooks on your server, and your admin will be like scrambling, why have these workbooks actually the same data source, but there's so many data sources you build from the same data source in the backend. And they have to start a cleanup project for that just to reduce all that clutter. So instead of that, I would actually use the semantic layer and publish as one single source. It might have all the columns that are required for everybody, and then each individual user can actually take what they want to. And that way, you are actually keeping the source of truth as simple as that, and then you don't have to duplicate your efforts. So that is one of the main benefits of semantic layer. But as part of the semantic layer, we also have certain features like join culling. How many of you heard this term join culling in Tableau?
Is it a Tableau-specific feature, Sudarshan?
Actually, not. Join culling is a very well-known functionality in many of the databases. HANA has it as well inbuilt, join culling. But in Tableau, we use join culling for scenarios where you have lots of quick filters on your dashboard, and you want to actually be able to fire queries intelligently so that you don't have to do unnecessary joins.
So
like most of the times we don't.
It sounds very familiar, like referential integrity.
Exactly.
So how many of you know the terminology of referential integrity? Better.
That's
right?
good.
Yeah.
So
it's the same. It's the same concept.
It's nothing but the referential integrity. I'll show you when you do the live demo. We'll show how the referential integrity can be enabled in Tableau so that you get the join culling out of the box.
Is there any specific use case where join culling is really helpful? Is there a particular scenario where join culling could be really helpful?
Yes.
Because in calculation views, they already have join culling enabled, and it does kind of.
That's interesting. How many of you are familiar with HANA calc views? Many of you. Okay. That's great. So as you know, the calc views also, you can actually enable all that. But then when I'm using a calc view inside Tableau and let the self-service users build their views, they actually do a lot of things that actually may not be supported by the calc view itself. Like, for example, I have a ton of quick filters on my right hand, and then I actually do relevant values in Tableau. Even though there is a join culling enabled in HANA, but I still have to get all the values from the dimensions, and dimensions don't talk to each other, as you all know, right? No dimensions talk to each other. The only way to talk to two dimensions is through a fact table. So I have to make a join to the fact and then go back to my dimension. But if my ETL process is built in such a way that the referential integrity is already taken care, so the dimension values, what are their dimensions, only get populated in the fact table, so I can assume my referential integrity in Tableau so that Tableau doesn't have to actually join the fact. That's what the join culling feature in Tableau is all about. So that's what we're going to show.
So if I'm understanding correct, if there are a lot of quick filters, having join culling will be really beneficial.
Absolutely.
So how many of you in the room are aware that each and every quick filter in Tableau will fire a separate query? So a lot of you are aware. That's good. Okay.
Perfect.
Just minimize this. Let's do a live demo now.
So here I have a star, which is actually a published connection. How many of you are familiar with published connections in Tableau? Any of you? OK.
Published connection or published data source? Similar.
We can't see anything.
Oh.
Oh.
Is that only the presentation?
You already minimized it.
Can we not do live?
Should be able to go right to it. It's not showing it.
Mm-hmm. That's next.
Let him do.
So is it right here? This is
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. There you go. Yeah, now go back to this one.
Oh, man.
Okay, there you go. Sorry for that. You just have to fix it. Okay, so how many of you are familiar with published data sources in Tableau? Most of you. There you go. I think that's the best practice, and I'm very happy that most of you are already following that best practice. So what we did was we actually took a star schema. I would actually go and create a local copy, by the way. That way I can actually show you how the star schema is actually created. So let me edit data source. And I will log into HANA live. And we'll see how the published data source is actually built so that you understand how the star schema model can be actually built within Tableau. And the queries can be actually controlled that way from Tableau, what queries we want to run, rather than joining every single thing and actually taking more time. We want to reduce that amount of time. So this is a star schema, simple star schema. So I have 2 dimensions and a fact table. So stores is a dimension, and I actually joined by a store key to the position table, which is a fact table, and then joined to the items table. So now we have a perfect star schema. But in order for the join culling to actually function correctly, one of the prime things you need to keep in mind is the inner join. The inner join is the key. If you have an outer join, then the referential integrity will not come into play, even though you might enable referential integrity by going to data, and there is a section assume referential integrity right here. This is the setting you will click in order for join culling to kick in. But if you don't have an inner join, the join culling feature will not work even if you check this checkbox. So just make sure the data is all validated and it has an inner join so that it only brings the matching records. That's how inner join works, right? So the matching records has to be there so that the referential integrity can be taken care. So once this is enabled, as in referential integrity, Tableau will say, OK, if I'm asking a question from the dimension, I only fire the query related to the dimension. I don't have to actually join the fact table. That's what it does. So in order to prove it, like how this actually functions, we would actually go ahead and
Just start the performance recording first.
start a performance recorder. How many of you are familiar with performance recorder before I started? I think 50% of the room.
Yeah,
okay.
Just explain it.
So the way you actually enable performance recorder is go to the help menu, and then settings and performance recorder, start performance recorder. What this does, this actually activates the performance recorder on Tableau side, and it will start recording whatever you are doing, any action you are performing in the desktop is actually going to record. So first thing I will do is I will drag certain fields, and I can see the data actually getting pulled out, right? I drag the brand, and then I drag the dollar amount, and then I also want to put some filters. So let me do that. So I can go to state, and I can say show filter, and I can go to category, show filter. And now I have 2 filters on my right, and these are quick filters, right? And I can make them like single valued,
No.
drop down.
That's fine.
right? Or state also as a single value dropdown, right? So these are the queries now getting fired. Every quick filter is as simple as a SQL statement that gets fired to your backend. And in our case, it's HANA. So now I want to actually see, because I enable referential integrity, I want to actually stop the performance recorder. As soon as I stop, Tableau automatically builds a workbook for you, and it will show you what are the queries that got fired during this drag and drop activity that we did. So let's look at some of the events that got fired and look at the actual physical query. And if you see the physical query right there, when I drag the item, like the brand name from items table, it did not actually make a connection to the fact table pause, even though our model had pause connected to items, but the filter only took the values from items. Imagine if it actually makes join with the pause table, which has 1 billion rows, by the way.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about the data set. The demo, all the demos that we are showing today, it has around 1.5 billion records.
Yeah. So there's a lot of data, right? And if I have to go and say distinct brand name from fact table joined with dimension, it's going to take a long time. So referential integrity actually it proved that it really helps, because I just went on a small table, items table rather, joining the 1 billion fact table.
Yeah.
So that actually shows the improvement in performance right there. Okay?
Yeah, we are using brand and store in the quick filters as state, and you can clearly see that.
Yeah. So that's about join culling, and there are a lot of other things as part of the semantic layer I can talk about. But quickly, just to wrap up the topic of semantic layer, I would just say, as part of the data source connection, when you make a connection to HANA, we also allow you to specify Initial SQL. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Initial SQL here before I jump in? Okay, still again, 50% of the room only.
Or the session parameters in HANA? Have anyone of you used session parameters in HANA? Okay.
Okay, one.
Yep.
So the Initial SQL will allow you to actually write any pre-SQL statements that actually you want to pass through the connection before it makes the connection itself. So there's a lot of things you can do, but I would actually dive into the next topic, which is around security, and I will let Ritesh show some of the techniques on row-level security.
Just want to do the blank.
Yeah. So are you all with me? Is it going at a good pace, or?
Yeah, calculation views.
Calc views.
Yeah, that's a standard practice, because that's where you're doing a lot of modeling. That's where you can enable the join culling. You're using the projection level to filter the data and all, which we'll be covering in the next topics. So coming to the next topic, there are a lot of enterprise customers deal with row-level security and authentication, which are two different mechanisms, completely different. So one is seamless single sign-on authentication, and the other one is the user row-level security.
Does that mean you're talking about authentication and authorization?
That's right. There are going to be two different topics, how we integrate Tableau with HANA, how the seamless single sign-on work, how you can leverage your analytical privileges inside HANA, leveraging the single sign-on, and also, if you don't have the option, what are the other available mechanisms to leverage the row-level security? Because most of the enterprise customers, that's the ask.
I think a lot of people get confused with the terms authentication and authorization. They look almost like similar, but not the same. So Pritesh is going to cover authentication first, and then he will jump onto authorization.
Yeah. So as I was mentioning, we'll be discussing about the single sign-on architecture and the next, what are the other alternative approaches if you can't use that single sign-on architecture, but still would like to leverage the user row-level data security. Okay. So coming to the single sign-on, the authorization part, how many of you are using the single sign-on in the audience right now?
When we say single sign-on, is it single sign-on in HANA or single sign-on in Tableau?
So the seamless single sign-on. So you log on to Tableau, you're passing the user session back to your analytical privileges that is taking care of the row-level security.
So there's a difference, guys. There's a single sign-on on Tableau server, and there's a single sign-on in HANA available for you guys to automatically do that row-level security. So if your DBS did not tell you about that, you should go talk about it as well.
Yeah. So in order to have a seamless single sign-on and able to use your analytical privileges in HANA, which is pretty good, by the way, analytical privileges in HANA, you need to have these two important factors, and there are two different factors coming down here. One is Tableau Server, and one is Tableau Desktop. So when you log on to Tableau Server, when the user is viewing on the report, SAML comes into picture. So when you configure SAML on Tableau Server, that's how SAML is coming into picture. But when you have Tableau Desktop is not using SAML. You have to use Kerberos. The Kerberos mechanism is nothing to do on the Tableau server side, but you need to enable all the users to have a Kerberos login mechanism on your HANA side. So when you're directly connecting to the Tableau data, to any of your calc views or tables on HANA, Desktop automatically recognizes the single sign-on Kerberos is enabled, and that's how it is going to talk.
So are you saying that I have to use two different methods for desktop and server separately?
Absolutely. If any of these are not configured, there is no single sign-on. So there is no concept of, there is no way your single sign-on will work and you'll be able to leverage your analytical privileges. So it's a must. If you don't have Kerberos,
HANA, by the way.
Yeah, if you don't have Kerberos, it is a must. If you don't have Kerberos, your SAML is, even though if you configured, you'll not be able to leverage SAML. But if you don't have, similarly, if you don't have SAML, but you have Kerberos enabled, then both of them talk to each other, so it's broken.
Yeah. So what if my IT team says, like, we cannot enable Kerberos? Is there any other alternative?
There is. Just by the way, for the SAML part, I just want to quickly show that. This is the screen when you log on to Tableau Server, this is where you configure the SAML part. But Kerberos part, you don't have to do anything on the Tableau Server. It is completely done on your HANA database. Yeah, that's a very good question, Sudarshan. How many of you faced or have a use case that you cannot use Kerberos? Oh, so that's good.
One person. Okay.
Yeah, so we do frequently talk to a lot of customers, enterprise level customers, that they don't want to enable Kerberos. They just want to use SAML. There are a lot of companies who are not even using Windows, right? So they can't leverage Kerberos as well. So for that mechanism, there is a concept of, like what Sudarsh was covering in his before talk, is about the initial SQL. As all of you are familiar with the initial SQL, you define the initial SQL at the data source level. You define the session parameters, where you can grab the user session, whoever is logging on to Tableau report, who logs on to Tableau server to view the report. You grab the session user, and you can leverage it back in directly on your calculation views.
Let me quickly show a simple syntax how actually it's done.
Wait.
Is the workbook closed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go there. Yeah. Yeah. That's the syntax. Oh, you need to share again.
Yeah.
Function F8.
Yep.
Function F8. Duplicate. So just wanted to quickly show so that you guys are aware how this initial SQL parameters can be passed. As you can see on the left-hand side, the set command, that's a standard HANA command. And the session underscore user is a standard session variable in HANA. So you are actually setting that up front before actually even making the connection. You will set the session user to the Tableau server user. Whoever logs into the Tableau server, that particular variable will be captured into that parameter right there. And you don't even have to remember the syntax of that particular parameter. There's an insert, and you actually insert the Tableau server user right there. And you can actually set any of those variables into your session parameters, and then that will be captured, passed on to your HANA side. Yeah.
Have any of you leveraged Initial SQL, using Initial SQL and passing the session ID directly in your calc views? Not many.
Okay, that's good. Oh, you did.
Did you say yes?
Good.
Okay. Okay,
Nice.
so one person.
This is very powerful, because if single sign-on is somehow, for some reason you can't enable single sign-on, this is one other way to actually enable that.
Or if you don't want to use your analytical privileges on HANA. Yep.
I have a question. So if I do this and the session user is enabled to Tableau server user, then it might be that I have a column of
No, you don't have to. So the reason we are using this methodology is you don't have to get all the data at your user level because you're exploding your data set. You don't even have to do that. So create your stored proc. I'll be going through that in the next use case directly in HANA. So in your calculation view itself at the projection layer, you can pass the session ID.
Yeah, you don't want to work too hard on that. Yeah. It'll simplify your task. Yeah.
So this is the report. I click OK. And when I actually am looking at the report, so that actually
so this is right now firing a query, and it's actually passing Ritesh's credentials because he's logged into Tableau server as him, and it's going to fire a query to HANA, and now all the data is back.
So this is our row level security. I'm not using Kerberos. I'm not using SAML. I'm actually using a generic username ID. I'm using a generic username ID. There is no, at the connection level, if you can see down here, data source. I'm actually using system account.
Yeah.
But you can still leverage the row level security using the session ID. So for example, if I log off and a different user logs in, go ahead and log in.
Like me.
Yeah.
I should see my user ID now. Let's see.
Yeah, this is different.
Oh, that's my default homepage. That's why it went to, because I set it that way.
It's the same report.
Now that's my user
Now
right there.
you can see his name and completely different numbers. Based upon his security, he's going to look at the numbers, what he's supposed to.
So that ability to set the session user, is that something that's restricted to system users or?
No, anyone can, any publisher, any Tableau desktop publisher will have the access to it.
Well, I mean, the generic.
No, he's talking about HANA side.
On the HANA side?
On the HANA side, yeah.
No, he doesn't have to. No. Any developer, as long as you're a HANA developer. But because you need to be able to leverage that code again back in your calculation view. So as long as you can develop the models, you have access to the calc views to specify it. For example, here, let's deep dive into the calc view. So this is the whole calc view. So this is a projection layer. This is a fact table. So at the fact table itself, and the session user is a, for example. So remember that we did create that initial SQL. So we are getting that session user ID. So I did write a stored procedure in HANA to capture that session ID so that I can leverage that user back in my calc views. So here, this is my security table. And I do have an input parameter, user ID, and I'm saying that username is equal to the session user ID. This is where I'm defining the use case. And I join it back at the user level. So at the projection level itself, you are limiting all your data sets.
Instead of getting billion rows and then apply filter, slice and dice, we are actually slicing upfront so that we only get the authorized data back. We don't want to get 1 billion rows.
So for example, the UID input parameter is nothing but a scalar function, which is the stored proc. And the stored proc is nothing but the session user ID, which I defined back in my initial SQL. So I'm able to do like a circle back. Any questions in this one? Previous window, the expression window? Yeah.
And also, feel free to ask questions. Even after this session, we are available.
we can walk you through if you have any questions on this one.
So this is actually instead of using a HANA.
Yes. If you don't have, for some reason, if you have any issues with the analytical, and if you can't use Kerberos for any kind of reason, if you can't leverage it, yeah.
I also, like a real experience I had, like with single sign-on, we saw like 5 seconds taking, it was taking 5 seconds extra time for connection time. And when I moved to initial SQL, it changed to 2 seconds. So if some people are really, that 3-second window, if they're really particular about it, then it also helps.
Yeah. Yes, it works exactly like the analytical privileges. Yeah. At the projection level itself, we are limiting the data set. It's on the fly, and nothing to be worried about.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, yeah, so this is the report using the mechanism. It's using the published data source, the report, and it is able to leverage the security.
Yeah. So with that, I think we had the presentation right here. Yeah. Okay.
So we covered the topics of semantic layer and also how to leverage the authentication row level security. The next comes the questions of, in a lot of companies again, they do ask about the questions on, oh, I have this VP executive level dashboard. I have a dashboard that's being used on the supply chain floor, where the SLA time is within 2 seconds. I need to see my data, but there should be a lot of slicing and dicing as well. So which means I have like 15 or 20 quick filters. Like we discussed in the initial session, the more quick filters you have, the more number of queries that is being sent back to HANA, which means it will slow down your report. So more quick filters, bad. It's not specific to HANA. I mean, any kind of databases. So for that use cases, there's a particular concept that we came up with, which is using the JavaScript API. With that, I'm going to pass the session to you, Sudarshan.
So JavaScript API is, how many of you even heard the name JavaScript API in Tableau? Yeah, less than 50% actually, but that's okay. Today you will learn something, how powerful the API is, and maybe when you go back, you can actually start using it. So it's not really complicated. I'm not a Java guy, but I spent like a couple of hours to write that HTML page, and then I just took from my tutorial JavaScript API code, and I was able to make it work with HANA. So I'll show you the code as well a little bit, and then we'll talk about why do we even need to use this, right? As Ritesh mentioned, like sometimes the executive dashboards, they are really like, they'll say, oh, this has to run like, I don't want to see that circle thing. In 2 seconds, the report has to come up. But I need 20 quick filters though. I still want to see.
Do any of you have the use case? 20 quick filters, but the SLA is within 5 seconds.
I think there might be people with 50
I see Ken out there.
quick filters too. Yeah, so I think that's a challenge, right? Like how do we create a workbook with so many quick filters and still load the workbook in 2 seconds? It's not possible. Even a company's web page won't load in 2 seconds sometimes, right? But I still want, they have to see the dashboard in 2 seconds. So in those scenarios, I thought like, we can use our JavaScript API to actually separate the quick filters out of the report itself, and then have them in HTML layer, and then be able to call. So if you see the overview, this is the workflow that I used. So I'm actually separating all the quick filters into the HTML layer and have the visualization in Tableau. But using the JavaScript API, I embed the report into the web portal so that I have the quick filters in HTML, and then I have the JavaScript API using my workbook, so both on the same page, so that I let the users select what they want from the HTML filters, and when they say apply, I will pass that query to Tableau, and I should be able to drill down much faster. And I'm also making use of input parameters in HANA, and also the Tableau parameters, so they were able to talk to each other.
So you can directly pass your JavaScript API filters directly to the quick filters at the projection layer. Similar, we can filter out the data.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And as Ritesh showed actually some of the input parameters as well. So I'm actually using Tableau's parameters to actually talk to HANA parameters and get the result back quickly. Because that way, I'm not actually getting all rows back, just like what I said, like billion rows get back and then try to do slice and dice. It takes a lot of time. But I have to get this report in 2 seconds. So this is my solution for this. So some of the steps I used for this demo is like defining the HANA input parameters. So I asked Ritesh to actually, hey, Ritesh, can you go to the calc view and create these input parameters for me? And then I actually built the workbook, and I removed all the quick filters from the workbook, and created a HTML page with the filters, and then be able to pass the Tableau parameters to HANA through a custom SQL. So the custom SQL will basically take my Tableau parameters and then set to HANA parameters. That's what the steps are.
Yeah, and you can get a lot more creative with the filters on your JavaScript API. For example, every night, if you want to refresh the values within your the input parameters, I mean, in the quick filter values on your JavaScript API page, you can just refresh those values. And you're just passing those values, and you're limiting 20 or 15 queries, which is going to enhance your report so much.
Absolutely.
Specifically for your very, very important dashboards, like we spoke about. So do you want to do a quick demo? Yeah.
So I will actually show a small application I built using HTML, simple HTML, and I have a small web server running on the machine here. So we're going to bring up that web page, and then we'll see how I'm able to communicate with HANA directly using the parameters. So this is the web page. That dashboard is built in Tableau, as you can see. But the top filters, if you see here, all of these drop downs are all coming from HTML code. Okay? Are we showing the HTML page?
No. We can do after session if anyone is involved.
Yeah. So I'm not showing the HTML page, but it's a simple HTML. All of you know about what is HTML, right? So I just put a list items there on the top. And then when I pick my selection, I just have to say apply. Once I click apply, what JavaScript API is doing is basically firing a query to backend with the parameters that I selected here. So let's say dinner, then apply. And for your reference, I also put the parameter values right there in the base so that you can see what I'm applying from HTML. Is it really getting applied on Tableau side? And is it really pulling the data from HANA? So you can verify all three statements right there. So the parameter values are also changing. So some people might ask me, OK, is this dynamic parameters, which we never allowed in Tableau? We don't have dynamic parameters. But using API, we're able to set the parameter value on the fly. So that's the JavaScript code I've written. I can actually quickly show the JavaScript code for that particular thing. If I go back to my code and simply open the JavaScript file, it's a very, very simple function I've written. And it's called apply filters. What this code does is basically I am pausing my dashboard first because I have so many filters, right? I have 20 filters. Let's say in your use case, you might be having 20 quick filters. But if I set each filter, I drop down just like the default behavior in Tableau. As soon as you select a filter, it starts applying that. So what I did was instead of applying all of the filters at the same time, I paused it. The first line of the code says pause the whiz, and then I set each of the parameters with the values that user is picking from the list box. And then at the end, I'm saying resume. So what happens is it fires just one query. Instead of multiple queries, you have 20 quick filters, it doesn't fire 20 times. Now it's going to only fire one time when I say resume. That's the benefit of this code. So it will be more efficient. And that's why even though I'm actually slicing and dicing on a 1 billion table, my queries are running much faster. Even though I'm like I can just keep firing. And the data gets refreshed real time from HANA over the Wi-Fi connection what we have here.
Yeah, did you ever have a use case to connect your parameters on Tableau with your input parameters in HANA? Do any of you get that use case? So the only way right now you can do it is using custom SQL, which is not that efficient. So leveraging the JavaScript API is the best route. Okay,
since Ritesh mentioned that, we can actually quickly show the page that actually has. Can you show it?
This one?
No.
What do you want to show?
I just want to show the workbook. Yeah, this one.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm just opening the workbook so that you get an idea how the custom SQL is actually capturing those parameters so that you can also utilize the same concept. It's pretty straightforward. Once it opens up, you can see it's the same dashboard that I was actually showing on the JavaScript API demo. And you can see how, if you go to the edit, and then click on the custom SQL. And if you see the edit query, you will see I'm actually setting the HANA parameter values to the parameter values in Tableau. That is how it is getting passed. And the query is getting fired every time the user is clicking on apply, this query gets fired with the input parameter values that are actually taken from their quick filters. And that's how it works.
Yeah. These are all the input parameters.
Yep. And that's the demo for now. But I think, as you see here, there's so much work we are doing. Like we are actually firing these queries. And what if the data in the backend is changing while I'm doing this? There's a lot of changes that are happening in the backend. My ETL process is actually loading constantly. And my executive is seeing this number. And then let's say we lost a deal, a big deal, and we lost some revenue there. But he saw this demo before that thing happened. And we just get on the dashboard, and he will assume that, oh, everything is good, right? But something happened, and in the backend, data is already refreshed, but it's not showing up. It's not showing up on the dashboard. So how do we actually make sure he gets the right insight at the right time? Because that's very important, right? So we will jump on to the next topic, which is all about caching. How do we actually refresh that cache quickly so that my executive can see that change that happened in the backend without actually enabling refresh or anything like that? So
how many of you leverage cache, Tableau cache? Do you know how many of you know there is a caching mechanism in Tableau? Okay.
So you're all leveraging them.
You always want to
may not be noticing,
yeah.
but you are leveraging the cache.
If you have a use case of leveraging cache as much as you can, there's a lot of benefits of if you leverage cache, which means if one user logs onto the system, views the report, any subsequent users who are logging onto the system and viewing the report, it will be instantaneous. For the first user, it might take like 10 seconds, but for the subsequent users, it will take like 1 second, hardly 1 second. So there are different levels of the caching mechanism that we're going to talk about, and the default times, like what's the duration every time the cache is stored, with different options, and how you want to leverage the cache across different orgs. And whenever your data gets updated in the backend, either in your HANA tables, you want to instantaneously show those results, but also leverage cache. That is what we're going to talk in this topic. Mm-hmm. So these are the 3 different cache settings on your Tableau server. The first option is refresh less often. That means use leverage cache as much as you can, which means if a user, again, I was telling you, if a user logs onto your system, user report at 6 a.m. in the morning, the rest of the users who are looking at those reports throughout the day, the results will be instantaneous. It won't go and make a live connection again back to HANA. So if you have a use case, something like that, it's very beneficial.
So
and
is this a server-side setting, Ritesh?
Yeah, this is a server-side setting. So refresh less often, the cache will be stayed there for 8 hours. And the balanced, you can always say 20 minutes, 1 hour, and refresh more often, there is no cache. Each and every request will go and hit your live connection to your HANA. So Sudarshan brought about why he was mentioning about is the server-side setting is, do you have a lot of sites on your Tableau? There are a lot of business users having multiple sites, different databases, not only HANA, but different databases. So in that use case, if you select refresh less often, but there is also a use case, yeah, I want to refresh my cache every 2 hours or 3 hours. But when you select an option on the server, it's for everything. You can't say only for this site, for this particular business group, they can use cache, but the rest of the people, they cannot use cache. There is not. For that mechanism, there is a whole architecture that we're going to discuss about. So the cache workflow. How many of you leverage email subscriptions to warm up your cache?
To warm up your cache. So that's a tricky question, right? We're saying email subscription. A lot of people have enabled, I guess. But do you know that when you do an email subscription, it also affects, it actually warms your cache. So now you can think about, oh, I will set it at 6 a.m. so that by the time my executives come at 9, it's already warmed, right? So it's a way, it's a trick. So but does that solve the problem?
It doesn't. Yeah, in a way it does. When you email the subscription, when you're subscribing to a dummy user, you set up a dummy user, you have like 10 executive dashboards, warm it up. So from 9 a.m., if the business user is coming in, logging on the system, viewing the reports, it will be like 2 seconds, blazingly fast. But what about every 2 hours, the records are getting updated?
Yes.
Do you want to run your email subscriptions again? Yeah, you can. but it won't refresh your cache, which means if the users log in and click on the report, they will still see their old stale data. And
unless they close their browser.
Unless they close the browser. And there is one more option. You can say refresh is equal to y option. Anyone tried that option? Refresh is equal to y parameter? That will always refresh the cache.
That's a URL parameter, by the way. And you don't want to ask your executives to put.
Yeah, if you have like 30 reports, you can ask your VP saying, hey, can you add a tag parameter refresh is equal to y? They'll be like, what is this? What am I going to do with the URL? They'll get confused. So for that mechanism, you can see at the fourth step, there is a refreshing the script. You can directly log on to your Tableau server. And as you all know, Tableau's metadata resides on Postgres. There is a script that you can actually run saying, for these data sources, I have like 10 data sources. Any reports which are using these data sources, refresh the cache.
So are you saying this is out of the box that is available for this everybody here?
Yeah, out of the box. Needs a little bit of...
I mean the cache script, is it available out of the box?
It is not. So you have to do a little bit of coding, write some SQL update scripts, update statements, but it's totally supportable solution, nothing to worry about. But it will work. Where is the solution?
Right here.
Right here.
You're going to show it. Yeah. So that's why I asked, is this available out of the box? Because none of these people here must have known this. So.
No, actually, Ken is here. I work with Ken.
There you go.
And we implemented this solution, and he's our happy customer out there.
There you go.
Yeah. So what is on-demand cache refresh? Like I was mentioning before, if you have a use case, for every 3 hours, every 4 hours, your supply chain data, your executive level data, it's getting updated. Your KPI dashboards, it's getting updated every 2 hours, every 4 hours. But when the users click on it, you don't want your executives or your dashboards, which are being displayed on the whole screens. When they refresh, they want to see it. Just because the cache is awaited, it will take 10 minutes, 5 minutes because of so much. So you want to leverage again that the whole automated process of your ETL is done, your tables got updated. You want to run in warm up your cache running the email subscription. It's like a circle. But to warm up your subscription, you need to await the cache before you warm up your subscription. Yes.
So I think I have a use case. I have one set of users that wants to update their data every 15 minutes. But if I change my cache setting, it affects my entire server. And so they're causing me some stress.
Yes.
I'm trying to formulate this question.
This is your answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you tie up with your ETL job, everything can be tied up like a bad job, like a bad script. Your ETL job is done. Then you update your cache, run your subscription again, warm up your cache. The users log in every 15 minutes. They'll see their own data within like instantaneous 2 seconds. So let's do a live demo quickly. So I'm logging in right now. Let me look at the report. So this is the dashboard. I just have one row. So I saw the report. Now, going to go inside. I will update the records. I'm inserting a lot more records. So let's take that 15 minutes use case. After 15 minutes, there are a lot more records which got updated. Now, again, I'll go back. I'll refresh. I won't see the records because it's still hitting the cache. How many of you face this issue? Okay, so does it mean if I can go back and again click the report, it will come back? No. If I close the browser, maybe, but hit or miss. So, yeah, you can. Yeah.
Question?
You can hit the refresh button, but a lot of people they will not do that. Especially the executive level dashboards, because when the theory is when you open up the report, you want to see the data, right? It's not like a two-step process. So you log in, I see the report, you see the data.
So one of the scenarios, right, Shivi, is that when you embed this report into executive portal,
Yep.
you don't see the toolbar, you don't see anything, you only see the visualization, and there's no refresh button right there, or pause button. None of those are available for them.
Yep.
So,
a lot of your basic users who are on the floor, or your executives again, to satisfy your executives, they won't be clicking the refresh button, because they won't know. They won't know when did the data get updated. All they'll do is like refresh the browser, because they have no clue. Is the data getting updated 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour? They don't know. So all they know is they open up the dashboard and they have to see the results instantaneous. So I log on to my Tableau server. You don't have to log on to Tableau server to run these scripts, but this is Postgres. So I'm just simple update statement. I'm going to say await the cache. The cache is awaited so fast. Now, if I refresh, that's your updated data set.
does that make sense?
You know what I did? What did I do?
That's why I'm asking. Like,
What did I do?
Do you guys get what he just showed? Okay, explain.
So, what is that? Right. Yeah. So what did I update? I updated the timestamp by adding a millisecond to it. So in Tableau, if you ever republish a workbook or a data source, the cache gets awaited. The cache is gone. So what I did is like hacking the metadata and just add a millisecond. You can even add microsecond to it, and your cache is gone. And your execs or any business users will come and refresh the report. They'll see the data. Let me show the script again.
Does this like resonate with what you guys are working? Is it useful for you guys? I hope so. I think just to recap what we have shared so far, I know it's like we only have limited time, just 1 hour time.
Yeah, like I said again, we mentioned all the topics were the basic topics that we usually encounter with the customers frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So within 1 hour, we could not actually share. Honestly speaking, like this presentation, we put like 7 use cases, and when we practiced, it was going beyond an hour. So we just have to remove the other 3 tips and tricks. But we can actually share with you after the session outside the room or inside.
Yeah,
if
even
they
any
allow us
other
to stay
even
back.
any other common.
So we
HANA
can actually definitely share
problems.
But just to recap what we have shared so far, we talked about the semantic layer. We talked about joint culling. We talked about the row level security using SSO in HANA, and also the initial SQL within Tableau. And then we also showed use cases about JavaScript API. I'm sure like most of you will now look at JavaScript API and see if you can also leverage that. And then we also covered about how do we do on-demand cache refresh on the back end. But there are a lot more things to cover, and we have about 10 minutes time for Q&A, and we are open for any question and answers from you guys.
Any tips about distinct accounts against HANA?
Distinct cons. You do have a number of flags inside HANA. So set transparent filter flags, and you need to. You always want to use the counters. You want to set up the counters for distinct count. Whenever you have a use case, you need to use the counters. Yep. Yes.
So if you have 2 different users that have a different security
Yes.
role in HANA that has access to the same model, will the cache be shared between those 2?
No. So when you have a user security, the cache will not be shared.
Because the authorization is different. The data set is also different for each user.
Yeah.
Unless you know they're just not using single sign-on and they're just using the embedded credentials or as a generic user, it won't be shared.
Yeah. The cache is always awaited whenever you have a row level, whenever you're using the single sign-on.
And moreover, you invested so much on HANA. Obviously, it's an in-memory database, and you want to actually leverage that. And HANA is 100% in memory. Anytime, all of your data, whether you use it or not, it's in memory. So you should be able to take that data anytime you want. So even if Tableau Server Cache is not used, you should still get that performance as long as you follow some of the best practices we shared, the input parameters and how you set the parameters from Tableau. And even if you have 100 quick filters, doesn't matter. It'll still work. Any more questions?
Yes.
Will this update to the metadata affect the history of the workbook?
It does.
So it thinks that it has a new history entry?
New history entry, yeah. Yep.
So isn't there like a maximum or count of history, or it just keeps, when you publish a workbook, I'm talking publish.
Yeah, you're not changing the version. It's the same version.
Okay.
Yeah, the version is the same. Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Predicated on a live connection, right?
Yes.
So, I'm not that expert in HANA, but our table's so big in HANA, we have to do an extract for performance reasons. So that's defeating all the purpose. How can you use a huge table in HANA but still with a live connection?
How do you define big table?
What's like million, 2 million rows?
Rows or columns? Rows, right? Actually, as you understand, Tableau Extract is also a columnar store, just like HANA columnar store. Both are columnar stores, obviously. So it doesn't matter how many rows. Even if you have billions of rows, it will still work the same. As long as you keep the columns to a minimum, you have to make sure your columns are smaller. You don't want to have a 400 column table with a billion row, and you don't want to actually, start extracting that.
Yeah, you're not showing all 2 million rows on the workbook, are you?
No. That's back there. And then, like, if I have a live connection, I'm just trying to build the views, like drag an object. It's like getting the view like for 10 minutes.
It shouldn't be because, again, this demo was on billion, so I'm surprised it's for 2 million.
It's
it
not
shouldn't
about
be
the
at all.
rows again.
Yeah.
I just want to be very clear with you guys, like the columnar store, it doesn't care about the number of rows. It always matters number of columns. Yeah. So I would say make use of Tableau's federation capability that we have in version 10. We can actually do cross data source joins, right? And make use of join culling. So that way you don't have a one big denormalized table, rather you have smaller normalized tables and enable join culling and be able to pass queries intelligently so that you are not actually joining every single table for every single drag and drop you do. So that way you can actually minimize.
I'm also wondering the use case could be when he's using quick filters, he might be scanning through all the 2 million rows to do the distinct.
Yeah, I think he's.
It could be a denormalized scenario in this case. So normalized is better for analytics. Yep.
With live connection, that's okay to do a subscription. You don't get that subscription on the dashboard.
With live connections?
With live connections, the subscription icon does not show up when you can't get the subscription.
That shouldn't be. That shouldn't be the use
That
case.
shouldn't happen.
No.
Because I think the way subscription work is basically just like an individual user getting onto a Tableau server and try to run a report. It does the same thing for you, and then it actually captures the snapshot. It's just an image, and that it just generates an image at that time, whatever time you schedule, and it'll just send an email. But I'm not sure what permission levels you have on the Tableau server. Is there, are you a user who is using a report from an embedded portal, or are you a Tableau server user? You log into Tableau server. You do. And
do you see subscriptions for reports which are using extracts? That shouldn't be the case.
But we're connecting straight to live.
Has to be an embedded user, or I think SSO has to be enabled.
Yes, SSO has to be enabled. Yeah. SSO has to be enabled. Is your SSO working enabled seamless? Then it should. Yeah.
Because we have row level security in the line.
Yeah.
So only they can
when you click on Tableau report, does it ask for the password? Yeah, then you shouldn't be seeing that.
I think we should talk about that offline. Like we can actually.
I saw a Tableau knowledge-based article about it, and it said using live connections subscriptions is not any.
No.
That's the news.
No.
That shouldn't be the case.
That's not true.
But anyways, I think we definitely will work with you on that.
Let's connect.
Yeah,
let's connect
back
after this
because
one.
we did enable subscriptions. It works for us. But what version of Tableau server, we should actually look at all that. Yeah. let's look at that one. Any more questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't really hear his question. Was it about, he wasn't saying the subscription button?
He says that for live connections, the subscription button is disabled.
Yeah, that's how it shows for me if I'm using single sign-on. So, which is kind of a problem. So I've been having to publish with my credentials, and then they expire. So I didn't know what the best way to handle that.
So one of the ways like most enterprise work is like a single sign-on still should be enabled at HANA level, but then when you are allowing the super user to create their workbook, they use the generic system user, like application user, and they embed that credential so that users doesn't have to actually enter that generic user password every time. They will embed before publish, but the single sign-on will still be working on the HANA side, and that will actually return only the rows that are authorized for that user who logs into Tableau server. So there are two different users. One is the application user, one is the user who logs into Tableau server.
Okay, so you can use the same workbook?
Yep. One workbook for all users. Yep. Go ahead.
I was just going to point out, I think in the example that you just had up, he doesn't have that subscription box either. I don't think it's a problem that's specific to HANA. I think it's just a problem with Tableau in general when working with live connections.
Yeah, I think, I'm sure it's not a HANA specific problem because, yeah.
I don't think I even have my subscriptions enabled.
Yeah.
Let's take it offline.
Yeah, we can check that, yeah. Any more questions or any more things you want to talk after the session, you're welcome to stay back. Thank you.
Thanks.